a week or so.
May 20th, 2015 meeting of the Stoughton High School Building Committee. Item 1 on the agenda, public participation. This is a period in the meeting that the committee has set aside for people from the public to come and address the committee if they want to. Seeing nobody here present, I'm just describing it so that people watching at home will know that we do have this period of the meeting set aside for that purpose. Having nobody before us, moving on to the designer introduction presentation and the contract.
Thank you, TJ.
Dom.
As some of you know, Stoughton, City of Stoughton, Town of Stoughton has retained DRA, architectural firm. We have tonight Scott Wooden from DRA, who's going to present to us a short snippet of what they presented to the MSBA, which was successful in winning this project. And Scott, don't mind starting the process?
I don't mind at all. Yeah. Carl will be joining me in just a few minutes. Carl's the principal in charge on the project. And this, I can't remember exactly how long we had the MSBA, but we won't take nearly as long as that to go through our presentation this evening. But first of all, we'd like to say thank you very much for selecting us to be your architect. We're absolutely thrilled about this project. It works out really well in terms of our timing to be able to commit to this project right away. One of the things that we emphasized during the interview is that this project, because of its timeline with submitting the goal to submit the preliminary design program at the end of the summertime in September.
You can put it like
Yeah.
for the recording.
Sure can, sure.
Put it in your pocket.
I trust it's on.
Actually, you got to click a button, Scott.
It's an on-off button on the top of the,
On the top of this?
yeah.
It's already on, okay.
Okay, all right, good.
Okay, good.
From the background.
This is Kyle Franceschi
Carl.
from DRA.
Oh, Carl.
So I've just jumped into this, Carl, just getting started. So because of the preliminary design program, the goal is to submit that with the educational program and identifying which alternatives we're going to be looking at for the new school or renovation, this site or other sites. Being due at the end of in September, we wanted to get going on this right away. And as we'll show you later in the presentation, we've already had several meetings, and we've already gone around, driven around town, looked at some sites. We're putting together site analysis. We're starting this Friday with our visioning sessions with the educators and with the faculty. So right from the day after we were awarded the project, we took that afternoon off, cleared up some other things. But then the next day we were ready to jump right in, and we're really eager to get going and get the momentum building up, because these first couple steps, especially with the summer interrupting our access to a lot of the faculty and staff, we really need to accomplish as much as we can before the summer recess. So we point out, DRA's been around for over 90 years. We've been focusing on educational facilities for over 60 years. And our agenda for the MSBA presentation was to talk about some of the key issues for this project, what our approach to the design was going to be, and then just a question and answer period. We expressed that we were the right team, we had the right process, the right experience, and we really had the right timing to step into this project full-time right away. Our project team, we focus on the architectural team, of course, but our cost estimator, we express that he's really a key aspect of our team. We integrate the cost estimator right from the very beginning, so even as we're conceptualizing and thinking about different alternatives for different sites, we're getting input from him. He's really integrated into the team so that we don't start going down any avenues that are going to be cost prohibitive later on and are going to interrupt our flow as we go through the design phases. Some of our consulting team, civil, landscape architect, the landscape architect and civil team joined us for our site tours this week to look at the different site options so we can get their input on evaluating them. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing principal in charge, very key component in the team, and also our educational programming team that we're going to be working. We're going to be working this weekend with Principal Miller and her faculty, with our in-house educational programmer Paul Moore, but also, is that me? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm the one making all that noise. and Frank Locker, who's an educational programming guru. He goes around the world. We actually Skyped him a couple of days ago. He was in, where was he? In Colombia. And what's great about having Frank on the team is he really brings a really diverse view of educational philosophy and educational programming, because he's seen it almost everywhere. He works with us just a lot just on the beginning part of the project, and then he sort of continues to collaborate with us over the course of the project in terms of how we integrate the philosophies and the big gestures, the concepts, into the design process. Okay.
There he goes.
The key issues we identified for this project, obviously educational programming, addition renovation challenges, the site selection criteria, how we go about looking at all of the site options in town objectively, and how we actually come about finding a qualitative way of evaluating those sites to determine if any of them are a better site than the existing site, and which ones rise to the top as being better options than others. Community outreach, always very important on a project like this, and our definition of project success. As I mentioned, this is a really tight schedule in the beginning because of the summer being, this is where we do our principal programming with the educational faculty. So capitalizing on that in June is going to be really important, and we've got a plan in place to do just that. And then over the summer, we'll be working with the principal and her team in terms of putting together the educational program and being able to submit that in September. So the big milestones are we submit the preliminary design program in September. That's where we say, this is the educational program, these are the educational goals, this is the enrollment, this is the square footage, and these are the options that we're going to look at. MSBA blesses that. We go on and we study those options, and we come up with a preferred alternative. So in December, what we're going to be submitting to the MSBA, and that's a big milestone, that's going to be the preferred schematic report, and that's the preferred option. We say we've evaluated these 6 options, we've evaluated these 4 sites, this is what we're presenting to the MSBA as our preferred scheme, this is what we want to go ahead and develop for the town of Stoughton. And then they go about approving that in the beginning of the year. There's big meetings, we deliberate, they make a lot of comments, and we incorporate them, and then we get approval, and then over the beginning of the year next year into, I think, May, we develop the schematic design. That's when we start really working on the floor plan, how everything goes together, and we start looking at the massing of the building and exactly where it's going to sit on the site, obviously knowing at that point which site and whether it's a renovation addition or a new construction scenario. So I'm going to gloss over these couple of slides, but because this gets into the educational programming. It talks about 21st century learning, how we're going to achieve the teaching and learning objectives, how we're going to work with integrating your faculty and staff's current methodology, but also looking toward the future, and how do we want to capitalize on this building project, leveraging advancing the educational program and advancing the educational philosophy. What new things can we do through the architecture and through the design, and having a brand new, fully new equipped high school with all of the bells and whistles for 21st century technology? How can we leverage that into moving the educational program forward that much further? And that's something that we're going to talk about a lot on Friday, and then into our meetings that we have in the beginning of June. This was a recent study that we did with Frank, that we developed these core breakout areas and flex spaces. Something we talked about during the presentation is using the entire school as a teaching and learning tool. All of the environments within the school can be manipulated and tweaked so that they can all become educational opportunities. Carl, do you want to touch upon the renovation stuff, or you want me to?
One of the things that we think distinguishes us is our experience with
You need to get the
addition.
mic on.
I'm sorry, we're being recorded.
Oh, do we have an extra?
Yes, Maureen's not talking today. Maureen's not going to say anything.
On.
Over this.
Okay, thank you, sir. DRA's done a tremendous amount of addition renovations, and we pulled out, what, 5 or 6 recent ones that all happen to be high schools, as a matter of fact. All of them that were modified in some way while they remained occupied. You want to
I can
click
advance
through?
it for you, sure.
Yeah. Southeastern, is Roberta here? She's not here. Roberta was on the building committee at Southeastern there, but Needham High School, where I happen to live actually, my kids were in school at the time that this was going on, had a historic portion of the building, very similar to Stoughton High School, 50s and 60s additions, and a little different configuration, but the option that was the preferred option here was to do selective demolition, renovation of the historic portion, and it ended up looking like this. So a significant new classroom building, a renovated, restored, historically sort of restored original portion, 1920s, a new entrance front and back, a new site circulation pattern, that sort of thing. All accomplished in about 6 phases over 3 years while not a day of school was lost. And they didn't need portable classrooms. It was done in such a way that the new construction served as the swing space. A project in Weymouth, you might remember Weymouth used to have 2 high schools, Weymouth North and South. This was done to consolidate them on the site. This was the high school, this was a middle school on the site. The option here was to do selective demolition, relocate the middle school, use that portion of the site to do a significant new addition and link here. So here's that old high school, you can see it there. It has the gym, the auditorium, some math and science classrooms were in that wing.
Oh, vice versa, Carl. That was
Sorry?
humanities was in the
I'm sorry,
existing building.
humanities.
Yep.
And then in the large addition, more classrooms, new cafeteria, vocational spaces, and obviously a completely new site plan. And again, done while the existing school remained occupied. So these are some examples that we were showing that if it came to that here in Stoughton, we have a tremendous amount of experience with doing phasing. One of Joel's favorite projects in Milton. The thing that's, without getting into too much of detail, the thing that's the real takeaway here is that we actually swapped sites. The middle school and high school swapped sites there. And that was part of our look at, the entire town. We did a feasibility study for all their buildings actually in Milton. And that was the preferred option there. The best site for the high school happened to be the site of the current middle school. And so there was some existing building preserved and renovated. Big new auditorium, field house, entry, and so forth was part of the new construction. And then down in Southeastern, a much more modest bit of new construction. I think if you click, it'll highlight that, Scott, there. A new gym and locker room was built. That was the only new construction on the campus. Some other outbuildings that you can't see here were eliminated, and the building was consolidated back into the main structure, but we were able to take the former gymnasium space, turn it into a library, take the former cafeteria space, the former library space, I'm sorry, next one, and expand the cafeteria. So this used to be the library here. Now it's a much more modern sort of commons. There's still kind of a circulation path through it, but now the cafeteria is opened up, and it's a much more friendly, welcoming kind of student common space. So these are some of the lessons we've learned from all that experience that we can apply here in Stoughton. And we've also done a fair amount of new construction, building a completely new school next to an existing building, if that's the way it should go. And again, here are some examples, and we can go pretty quick. So you can see how close. Here's the new construction. Here's the existing building. At that point, it was like 15 feet apart. And these happen to be auto shops here that actually needed access, too. And working with construction manager helped a great deal in figuring out the constructability aspects. That's the new school. This is out in Springfield. Another project Scott worked on, a new K through 8
This was the
school
existing school here.
built
We
next to an
actually
elementary
needed to
school.
remove classrooms on the end of this wing to be able to get this configuration in here. But you can see especially how tight the staging area for the contractor was limited to this area here.
The school stayed in operation. They accessed from this side. The contractor accessed from this side. Everybody was sort of safe during the period it took to build it. And then once the school was gone, obviously, parking, drop-off, fields could be developed. one other high school out in Sturbridge. This is the brand new high school here. This is the existing high school. There was some demolition needed to open up the site, so they actually lived without a gymnasium for a year there. That's the new high school as it sort of steps up the hill in that district. And again, some of the things just to touch on. Working with a construction manager might warrant serious consideration here because of if it ends up going that way of a construction, whether it's addition, renovation, or new on the same site, if it's very tight, there's some advantages to that methodology. The other thing we want to mention is, strict construction documents. Regardless of which way it goes in public construction, we've learned a lot about, writing very tight specifications, making sure contractors understand about school schedule, MCAS schedule, quiet days, where traffic can go, where parking can go, and that sort of thing. So we've incorporated that into our thoughts here.
These were just a couple of slides that while our landscape architect was talking a little bit about how we were going to study this site and other sites, just some of the criteria that we looked at, some of the existing traffic flows, and I guess challenges and opportunities that he saw with the existing site in regards to pedestrian vehicular circulation. And we had identified just through GIS mapping and information that was available on the town website what properties in town represented the school properties, what were town owned, what is conservation land, what are vacant properties, as a means of starting to identify some of the potential sites with available acreages and not so many wetland or zoning restrictions that might be buildable or appropriately sized for a school facility. And this is just an example of some of the tools that we use for helping the town to come about making a site selection. Like I said, we try to develop a qualitative-based selection process where we come up together with what are the different criteria that are important in site selection, what is the weight of those in the decision-making process, and we come up with a numerical system for voting on them to say, hey, we came up with some sort of scientific way. It wasn't just pie in the sky, throwing a dart at it. We came up with some sort of qualitative-based system that enabled us to make the selection somewhat intelligently. And we talked a little bit about how we go about the actual design process and what types of things inform the design process, and how we start with after we've come to understand whatever site we're building on, this site or another site, after we come to understand the site intimately and the program intimately, like what is the educational program, how big is it, how is the program allocated between the different educational areas, we start to make gestures like this in terms of how it sits on the site and how the overall broad brush circulation and access and massing of the building works. And some design concepts might be informed or enforced by some of the basic tenets of educational architecture, like site as a learning tool, the building for community use in evenings and weekends in addition to just its educational use, connections, arrival sequence, breakout spaces. And we talked a little bit about how some of those gestures, like the arrival sequence, if an arrival sequence into a main lobby is by two different locations for maybe a bus drop-off and a car drop-off area. Maybe there's a satellite entrance somewhere else for an auditorium or a gymnasium. How that might inform a gesture on the building, right? So this isn't the design of a building, but it's the design of, it's the thought about a concept and how that articulates into materials and massing. In this sketch, we were kind of thinking about the connection between those two arrival areas and how the lobby could be very glassy, so you can have a lot of transparency between a central administrative point, maybe a security desk that can see through both of those entrances, but also perhaps see down the corridors into the classroom wing or the assembly spaces, so that by that central control point at that node, you can have very great security of all of the different aspects of the morning and afternoon coming and goings of students and faculty. Community use of the building. Obviously, we want this building to serve as much as it can for as many hours of the day, as many days of the year as it can, both for educational use for students, educational use for adults perhaps, and also all sorts of community uses for educational areas, access to computer rooms, access to the media center, access to the cafeteria for the Boy Scout, Girl Scout troops, access to the gym, access to the auditorium. But it gets very challenging, and we're pretty good at this, and we work very closely with our hardware consultant and with you in terms of segregating different parts of the building, because you need to maintain safe egress for all of those spaces, access, but you want to be able to secure as much of the building so the person who's running the building at night for that basketball program or the Boy Scouts doesn't have to survey the whole building. They just have to survey a limited area. And with the way that we control lockdowns and alarming, we can sanction off portions of the building while maintaining the others safe and secure. One area that we see used for that quite frequently is the cafeteria. And as this sketch demonstrates, the connections become really important. The connection both to the exterior for perhaps direct access from the exterior into the cafeteria without necessarily going into the school building at all, but also how do we control that connection back into the school building? And are there any spaces that would perhaps be used during the daytime where we would have to have community access to this small component while the rest of the building is operating as a school? A number of things that we're going to be talking about during our programming process. And as I pointed out earlier, breakout spaces throughout the building, this is a core philosophy of ours, is trying to find every opportunity to put up a learning kiosk or some artwork or a graphic representation of the history of the town or something about the curriculum, finding every way we can to use places along the corridor to demonstrate components of the curriculum that's being learned within the individual areas, so that as you come and go throughout the course of the day, every space offers an opportunity for learning, an opportunity for teaching, an opportunity for some interaction that will stimulate growth and curiosity. And this was just an idea of how a kiosk with some of those elements in it could serve as a place where people meet over the course of the day in comings and goings, and it becomes an educational tool. So really quickly, because I know we're running a little bit long with this, but we wanted to share with everybody here what the few of you got to see at the MSBA interview, because it was so good it won us the job. So, we're really happy. So what we did in the interview is we only looked at the existing site on Pearl Street. And what we did is we looked at, I forget exactly what the number was, but we looked at addition, renovation, and new construction options on that site, just to see if we build a new, I think it was 204,000.
We had 3 or 4 of each. 204,000
square feet. So how does that fit on the site, and what does that look like if we actually lay it out as a building? And that's all we were trying to do, is just get the massing of the building to be the right size to do a test fit on the site. So the first scheme we looked at, I think I jumped 2 there. The first scheme we looked at talked about putting a gymnasium addition on the end here, and with some modulars, creating some classroom space here so that we could get in and renovate the bulk of this existing building. And then, we would then repopulate this area, and people from the classrooms and program that's supported in this wing would then be placed into the modulars so we could renovate that wing. And then we would demolish this existing area down here, and some of that program elements would be displaced into the modulars, and then build out a new, was this auditorium? This was auditorium?
Library Media Center.
Library Media Center.
New entrance,
Okay.
connector. Yeah.
Gym and offices, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the access, this parking area, because of the new addition, this would get smaller here, but we would still offer some parking around here, and then there would be a new major drop-off right along Pearl Street. And that's the final build-out. You can see some of the fields are reconfigured.
That
but
option has
largely
the least impact on the existing fields, because in essence we're renovating or rebuilding the building almost in place.
But this is a pretty long process too, because it happens in
Doing it in
stages and
phases.
there's multiple phases.
Mhm.
Now, this option looks at putting a new classroom wing down on the south end of the building and renovating that area.
Demolishing it, yeah.
Oops, I'm sorry, demolishing that area.
Replacing it with
building
a gym.
A new gymnasium wing, yeah. And then we were we were renovating that one, or was that was the new one?
Yeah,
in
that's
that one.
also new, yeah.
No, it was shaded as blue. And then demolishing the existing gymnasium, renovating that.
Yeah, the thought here was that perhaps, you know, if there was some desire to salvage the oldest portion, historic portion of the school, maybe into the superintendent's offices or something, that could be worked into a scheme like this.
Right.
But now you've got, you know, the gym and sort of the public functions right here, the classrooms in those two wings here. And again, the fields would have some impact just because the footprint is probably slightly larger than the existing.
But the parking
Yes,
and the traffic
I just
flow.
want to make sure we clarify with everybody here and certainly on TV. This was stuff you guys did as part of a presentation.
Without any input.
Without any input,
from the
without
town.
any,
Right.
really, you know, to sort of present your firm, you know. So
Approach,
I don't
yeah.
want people to think that, there really is not a lot of sense in talking about any of
Right,
these
thanks
options.
for
Because
that.
frankly, they may not become even options that are put in front of you in whatever, 2 months or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So just to be clear, these are just things that these guys did to show the design selection panel, the creativity they bring to any project, not necessarily specifically
Right.
Stoughton.
And showing some of the tools that we use, because these are quick ways that we can generate ideas, and we can come back and talk about them as a group. And absolutely, this is with very little understanding of the program, minimal understanding of the site, and no input from the town, which is absolutely critical, of course, in these projects. This scheme looks at a major addition at the south end of the building, just maintaining the auditorium cafeteria wing, and then demolishing the balance of the building and renovating the cafeteria and the auditorium. And this would reconfigure the fields substantially and changes the circulation pattern. As you can see, there's still access off of Pearl Street, but a drop off here along what we would see as being a major concourse here, plaza, and also a drop off of Adams Street. Is that Adams?
Yes.
Yeah. Right, so it refocuses the building to this side, you know, that just to show that we have no preconceptions about where the front of the school should be. We'd think about looking at it from other directions. And using this tool too, you can see we've got the site modeled based on an aerial photo. The next step we would use in this tool is to actually model the contours too. Right now it's just flat because it was quick and easy to sort of do that, but there's a fairly significant grade difference between that property back there and Pearl Street side of the building.
Right. And a couple of new construction options. Again, just to show that this could be a configuration, as we saw in the West Revere model. This could be a configuration of a school building. This is shown with the square footage on. Is this 2 stories here and 3 stories here, Carl?
Yeah, I think, yeah, because this is the gym and locker room combination. This is a 3-story classroom wing. I think in order to fit the program, you'd probably be massing it, you know, something like that.
But you can see generally what the size of this would be with it on the site, the disruption it would cause to the existing fields, but that it could be completely constructed in 18 months, 20 months, and this facility could be maintained in use completely during that time. It's
Yeah.
a very quick way of doing the project, but of course it does displace your fields and these activities that are supported on those fields for the duration of the project.
Obviously lose some parking back here as well, and you know, you could make that up perhaps here, issues like that.
Right.
One of the cute things here, go to the next one, by demolishing this, you're a little bit freer as to what the future holds of that building. You could actually renovate it, freestanding, return it back to the way it was. You've seen that historical photo? I don't know if everyone has seen that. It's very nice. And you could still, in this sense, have the front of this could still be the entrance. You could still have the front of the high school be on Pearl Street, and in the foreground you have the historic high school there.
Would be quite nice.
There, so looking at it from Pearl Street as an option. Other configurations to organize the building, kind of like Scott's partie diagrams there, you know, try a courtyard, which would be fairly tight on the site, but it could fit there. Obviously, now it sort of changes the master planning of the whole site, where some green space now is here, whereas right now, kind of all the green space on the site is in the center, shared by the elementary school, the middle school, the high school, and the green spaces in the center. There are other ways to think about it where maybe the school starts to occupy more of the center and the green space is on the periphery, like this option here. When you build very close to the middle school, you could still maintain this driveway going through, but now the green space is on the street side of the building. So it's a very different feel, just to show you sort of the full range of possibilities just that initially came to us. And then we spent a moment, and it's on our agenda tonight, so about our process of partnering with the community and getting input. This is from a recent project actually with Tim's firm out in Hopkinton for the design of a new elementary school where they needed to study not only the existing site but 4 other sites, I think, in town. That's our landscape architect there showing site plans. And one of the things you might notice, there's some colors up here and some stickies, little notes. We organize these things, I guess we can talk about it a little bit more later, but organize these things in such a way that it's not just a presentation by the design team to the community. It's an interactive workshop. That's how we see it. The first part of it might be, obviously bringing people up to speed and informing them on some of the issues and the limitations and so forth. But a good portion of it is getting input. Some of it in a larger format, some of it in smaller breakout sessions where people gather around, a cafeteria table, and we have people from our firm at each table kind of facilitating, but it's really an opportunity for the community to have input. So these are just some images from that. We can talk about it a little bit later in the agenda, I guess. But we're also very willing and able to incorporate, social media, which you're doing a great job of already, and cable TV and that sort of thing. So it's not just the public sessions that involve them. And then one of the things we were asked about is how do we define success? This is something that at DRA we've had for about, 20 years or so, that these 4 factors are how we define success on a project. First of all, that you as a client are satisfied and happy with the result, that it was done on time, meaning our work as well as the construction work, but on or under budget, and that's something that we can all be proud of. So that's how we did it. There's some of us in our office there. So, thanks.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you,
Okay.
Scott.
You're welcome.
And as you can see, they've started running
Do that.
the day after, and but they've done it in faith with us because we haven't really executed a
that,
contract
TJ.
yet. In your package, I did send the contract that DRA has presented to us. Tim has reviewed that contract. We did forward it to the town for their comments. There were no comments back. Process would be that I think is that we have the school building committee approve the signing of this contract.
I think we recommend the approval.
I think you're signing the contract, right?
Mike signs the
Yep.
contract. So TJ, I think you have to have a motion.
Yeah, can I ask a question before you go on? And maybe this ties into what we're doing right now, maybe it doesn't. But one of the things that Scott mentioned was they may recommend construction management as part of this.
Mhm.
So how does that differ from what our OPM is doing and the architect is doing project-wide? I assume that that's a separate function altogether, and can you explain that to me? Given that we're discussing scope of services for design right now, I assume that typically that would be some of the architect, but there would also be some crossover with the OPM. No?
Well,
I mean, what would a construction manager be doing
yeah,
in this
so-
project, given what we have right now?
so construction management risk, so the traditional style of building a project is you design it completely without any involvement of a construction company, obviously. You put everything on the plans. They bid what's shown in the plans. They give you a low bid number, and you take the lowest responsible bidder, and they build what's on the plans. In 2004, when the Construction Reform Commission passed, the legislature passed construction reform, they allowed municipal public entities to have the same access to construction management at risk, which I'll give you a quick summary of, but that is done predominantly in the private sector, which on certain projects that the complex, and this is my take on it, I'm people, professionals, but on certain projects where the complexity of the project is such that it's not as easy to communicate it in the four corners of the document, or it would benefit from having construction input during the design to, as Carl mentioned, for constructability issues, because they're going to actually be accountable for building it. You can now bring on a construction manager during the design phase, and we need to make that decision at the end of schematic design. We don't need to make it now. And would there be a lot more presentation on that than what I'm giving you? You can bring a construction manager on, see him at risk, through a competitive procurement process, but it's a much more qualification-based selection process, because you would actually pay them a design phase fee for the design phase services that they provide, and you would negotiate a guaranteed maximum price with them on the basis of an open book process. So we'd see all of their quotes and subcontractor quotes, and there's a filed sub-bid process that is part of that process once you get the design done. And the contractor, the construction manager at that point owns the input that they've provided into the design. So it's good because it tends to prevent unnecessary, well, it tends to create a lot more collegial, collaborative atmosphere versus a combative atmosphere during construction, because they actually don't have the option of saying, you know, we're just doing what's on the drawings. They kind of have, they've been part of that process. And some people say we will get a different kind of contractor in that phase. Some of them cross, but a lot of them specialize in construction management at risk or specialize in general contracting. So they don't do anything different than what a general contractor does, except they provide you design phase services during the course to own, sort of be accountable for some of the decisions made in the drawings. In other words,
It's
our
timely
role
that-
and the architect's role doesn't change significantly. On the finer
Right, I
edges.
was going to say, it's timely that you brought it up now, TJ, because the MSBA anticipates this possibility, and they, in their standard contract, in the first phases, it's for us at least, I think for the OPM as well, it's a base contract, regardless of whether you're going to go the first option of design, bid, build, or construction management at risk. But once we get to the end of schematics, they've prepared two separate amendments to that contract. One, if it is design, bid, build, because the services are slightly different, but it's in the next phases. So that our services now are not affected by it.
I should mention, TJ, that the Southeastern Regional Voc Tech project was done with a construction manager at risk. And talking to the people that were involved, there was a lot more flexibility. You were able to do a lot more things. You didn't have to worry about whether there was going to be some kind of massive change or something. But I agree with Tim, the best part is that you have somebody there during the design phase who has their input, and then they basically buy into the project. They can't come back and say, oh, we didn't realize, if you get what I mean. It's a service-oriented contract versus design, bid, build, where from the general contractor's point of view, you're trying to maximize the most money you can out of the contract.
And it's also something that we'd have to put in an application to the Inspector General's office, and they would have to view the committee and the team and see that if we did have the right qualifications in the site, in the project, that they would review it and decide whether they were going to give us permission to go that way or not.
Can be more expensive up front as well. You're paying up front for a guarantee on the other end. Design, bid, build, you're always open to change orders at the end, having to pay. CM at risk, you pay usually a premium up front with the understanding that you're going to cut it back on your change orders at the end.
There are change orders, though. People shouldn't think there won't be change
No,
orders.
they're-
But the theory is that you'd have less because they've been involved in the design, so they can help, you know, anticipate some of those.
Minimizes the claims that might be
Right.
on the project
Right.
because they're more familiar with it.
But I think I mean, other than sort of a brief, we can talk about it, but we would have a lot more discussion about it and a lot more sort of presentation probably at the end of schematic design when we know more about what the project is going to look like.
Sometimes I just ask questions as they cross my.
No, and it's a good idea to do it. No, it's a very good question.
One of the requirements of getting permission from the IG's office is that Compass Project Management,
It says DBB, Design Bid Build. I thought that's what triggered your question, because it references that in the standard
Well,
contract.
I was whizzing through the contract quickly
Yeah.
trying to find.
one of the things, TJ, about the process is when you go for the IG requirement, the first thing is that OPM, Compass Project Management, is going to give a presentation on the differences, which will be a good portion of a meeting, so that everybody can see what it's like and make a decision about what they want to do. It's not a decision that can be done lightly. It really has to take a lot of thought.
Mhm.
Thank you for going through that for me. I hope that was helpful to somebody else, so I don't feel like I was alone on an island with that. But
No, it was a good, because it was raised, it was a good, it was a good discussion.
having gone through that, is there a motion to sign the contract as presented before us?
I'd like to move that the building committee recommend that the contract be executed as shown.
Okay. All those, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
You're behind schedule.
Next item.
We have our
is-
first invoice.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. The next item on our agenda is the Stoughton Girl Scouts recommendation. This was a letter that was forwarded to me by Maureen Doherty in regards to Girl Scout Junior Troop 65159. They sent it to our chair. It's a quick letter, so I can read it real quick. We are the Girl Scout Junior Troop 65159. We are on a journey about saving energy. Part of the Girl Scouts law is to use resources wisely and make the world a better place. Saving energy is a way to use resources wisely and make the world a better place. We would like to ask you to make the new Stoughton High School energy efficient. A few suggestions in the ways to make the school energy efficient that we have are: 1, installation motion sensors for lights; 2, install energy efficient heating; 3, install low flow faucets and toilets; 4, include recycling bins in the cafeteria and classrooms; 5, purchase equipment that is energy efficient and come with sleep mode. Thank you for your time considering our IDs and planning for the new Stoughton High School. And it's signed by Desiree, Kenna, Veronica, Catherine, Grace, Angelina, Ella, Alexis, Lindsay, Emma, and Chloe. I can speak, I don't want to speak for DRA, but I can speak for DRA. I think we're all on board with this letter going forward, and we'll incorporate it in our design. Any
I'm
comments?
going to ask if they included their resumes. We'd like to hire them.
Well, there'll be future users of this high school, I'm sure. So.
And just to, I think people realize also that the MSBA actually provides some incentive for you to incorporate green measures, 2 points, and they would include pretty much all of these measures plus more. So I think the committee's fully committed to making this sustainable.
Does somebody need to respond to them?
I would think that would be a good idea if somebody drafted up a letter and we responded as the committee.
If you like, we could do that.
Oh, I think
It's-
that's
TJ,
wonderful.
it's to you. Do you want us to do it and send
We'll
it to
just
you?
forward it over to them.
If
Sure.
you would, that'd be fantastic.
If you could invite them to the
I was
workshop
going
on
to say
June
the same thing. That would
6th.
be
Right,
great.
that's a great idea.
Because one of the tables we could have as a breakout session
Yeah,
could be
that's-
students, and they'd feel
It's a
comfortable
great
talking.
idea.
Yeah.
We will do that.
Make them know aware of that.
If I may add one point too, all of the MSBA requirements, baseline, are required to be at least LEED certified level. So LEED certified level will bring almost all of those criteria that were listed on that particular letter as mandatory on the project, and something that's standard on all DRA projects. But I think that they'd also be interested to learn a lot more of both the passive and active sustainable strategies that are going to be employed in the new school, because it goes well beyond that, and they'd be interested, I think, to learn how much energy we're capable of saving in different methods.
I was going to say, the existing building has most of those already implemented.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it hasn't done us any good.
Well, this is, nowadays, the buildings are all, it's integrated. See, you did it all piecemeal probably in the existing building, but
After
everything is
retrofits.
integrated.
Right.
It's a much more efficient.
Yeah.
That was a segue that Carl said about our upcoming community forum meeting and the invitation to the Stoughton Girl Scouts to join us. But, in your package, you have a draft agenda for Our first community workshop, which will be held June 6th in the Stoughton High School cafeteria. We'll have 2 sessions. The proposed sessions will be from 9 to 10:30 and 1 to 2:30 on June 6th. I think we'll try to wrap this up on Friday, our working group meeting, so that we can get that information out on local media, social media, et cetera. I know people know about it too, it's been out there, but we'll try to get that out more official.
So just from, that you had asked as a committee that we put together a draft of what this community workshop would look like. So this is a draft that DRA, who would take a large role in sort of running the workshop, put together in consultation with the working group on that a couple of Fridays ago. The purpose of this is much more explaining the process and getting feedback from people, and not as opposed to sort of saying, here's what we're doing or thinking, because we really aren't there yet. So this is one of 3 workshops. The second workshop would be a lot more, we'll have developed things and we will be a lot more informative about that, which we're thinking of doing sometime in early September. And then the last workshop would be sometime in the later fall before we make our final ESBA submission. So it just for the public, the more people that can come to these workshops, the more help it is in terms of putting together a project that reflects everybody's feelings about it. And so, you know, obviously we'd encourage, and we are doing a lot of, Jean is helping us do a lot of outreach to get people to come on June 6th. It will be at the Stoughton Public High School, at the Stoughton High School cafeteria, and starts at 9 o'clock. So if anyone has any, from the building committee, questions about this, you know, we're going to go live with this agenda pretty soon.
And Carl, I know you talked about it briefly. I don't know if you want to put a comment about this.
Yeah, I think you can see from the agenda what I was sort of hinting at, that, you know, part of the presentation is us and the team presenting an overview of the process, kind of informing people about what some of the guidelines will be, what some of the limitations are, and to sort of frame and put things in context. But then the breakout sessions are where, as I said, one reason we like to have it in cafeteria is so that we can gather around at different tables, and we'll divide up ourselves, our team, and yourselves if you're there, and at different tables, and depending on topics that interest people. Sometimes it's not even crucial that we stick to a certain topic. If people want to talk about something else, that's good too. But to know what's important, what's on their minds, what preconceptions do they have, how do they define success on this project, things like that. There may be, you know, abutters that show up with a certain interest. There may be parents who have different interests, maybe students, and and we'll record these comments and then come back together again and have a brief recap. So if you were at one table over in that corner and you want to know what this table said, we'll have one person from each group sort of report back and recap, but then we'll capture all the comments too, and we can, you know, keep those as a record, and particularly issues about, you know, where is follow-up needed. If somebody asks a question that, you know, deserves follow-up, we'll record that, and at our next presentation we can show that, you know, 3 people asked about how's traffic going to be impacted. Well, we've now done some homework and we can report, here's, you know, what we found, that sort of thing. So, and we'd like to keep it timely so that, you know, especially Saturday, whatever, there might be soccer games, lacrosse games, Little League, whatever. So we like to stick to the schedule, but as we noted there, we do see it as an opportunity to tour the building too after the session, whoever wants to stick around. And again, depending on how many people, we could break into smaller groups then too, and head in different directions and circle back. But and we would imagine that the afternoon would obviously be identical, and we're only looking for people to attend one. Obviously, the agenda is the same for each of them.
Thank you, Carl. Are there any questions from the committee? Next item is just a site option investigation update. Just a brief history. When we first came on board Compass, we met with our smaller working group committee, and we kind of spitballed an idea of different places within the town that had certain qualifications that might be suitable to review as possible sites for a new high school. Some of the criteria were acreage, mostly acreage to start out with, and then the availability of that particular parcel of land. We've kind of distilled that down to roughly 8 or 9 items. Yesterday with Scott and Joe Walk and Carl, our landscape architect, our site,
The other Joel.
and Joel Harding was our scoutmaster taking us through the woods of Stoughton. It was my first nature walk in many years. But we did visit a few sites. We're not going to talk about the parcels yet because they might not be options right now. So to get into detail, we're still doing our due diligence. But we did take a look at some of the more applicable sites, we thought, and then our next step, Scott and I talked about afterwards, was to meet with the town engineer and also the town conservation person, environmental person. We're trying to set up a meeting on Tuesday, and then that will filter down to, possibly 2, 3, maybe less of parcels that we will investigate. So I just wanted to give an update. Some of the things that we do, as Scott brought up and talked about, the sites that we look at were traffic issues, things like that. But is there acquisition cost, the topography? We were talking about the traffic concerns, also the busing concerns. We learned yesterday, I hadn't realized it, but Joel told us that your busing also includes your middle school here. So you have the same buses taking your high school and middle school students into your academic center. So that's something to be, to also put on our list of concerns. If we are looking at another site, is it close by now? Also the neighborhoods, the streets, how wide are they? Can they be wider? And the traffic patterns. So that's just a quick update on where we are right now. And we hope that next building committee meeting, we'll have much more of a concrete look at what we are going to present in the future. Any questions from the committee? Okay.
I think the goal by the next meeting is to probably come with sort of recommendation to the committee about what, if any, of these other sites, and as we've all talked about, there's not a giant inventory of available sites in Stoughton, but what we're going to try to come back is sort of what sites might be available that we'd put on the long list of options to do further study on. Because as the more you put on, the more you start spending money on those sites, so that we don't want to put sites on just for the sake of kind of putting them on, but on the other hand, we don't want to foreclose them.
I'm assuming that at the next meeting, we'll also be able to eliminate a number of sites.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
In other words, come with ones
At
that
the
are left.
minimum,
Yeah.
eliminate some.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
We'll also be looking for input at that time on the criteria that Scott showed a matrix when we evaluate sites. Those criteria are not fixed. They're customized to each community, each project. So we'll have developed a list, but we'd like to discuss it with you and get confirmation on that so that as we move forward, we know what's important to you and not just us as
Thank you, Carl. Next on our agenda is a project schedule update. I'm going to have Tim talk about this. I did include a feasibility study that was forwarded to me by Joel Walk. It is part of the Module 3 of the MSBA, but Tim has also, in your package, an overview of the schedule. This schedule was also reviewed by DRA and is synced up to their schedule. So, Tim?
Yep, so if you go to page 88 of the giant handout, this schedule is the detailed schedule
wonder if I was blocking the screen,
of the project that takes us. In particular, we're focusing on up through the town approval process. So a couple of the items that are in red are sort of MSBA action items. The items in orange are did you guys get it?
Yep, they're all set.
That
Here it is.
are sort of this, well, you don't color, but the ones that are in orange have sort of Stoughton issues, or Stoughton sort of focused activity. So on this is, for instance, a couple of things that I just want to point out. One is on line 19 is the first community forum we talked about. This syncs up, if you were looking at the work plan that Scott talked about, this syncs up with that work plan. So our goal is to submit on line 28 the preliminary design program by the beginning of September, and have a second community forum pretty shortly thereafter to talk about that and get feedback on that. Once we go through a process with the MSBA of where they review it, they'll comment. They always comment, and there'll always be a need for us to respond to those comments. Nobody submits one in and it kind of gets blessed without any comment. Within that program, we're going to talk a bit about the educational program. And so that's a major part of what the preliminary design program includes, is the educational program that Julie is working on, and we'll talk some more about. But assuming, so that gets submitted. There is no board action on the preliminary design program. It's more of a staff review, and then we respond. Out of that comes a short list in September of sort of the 3 or 4 or whatever, or 5, whatever it becomes, sort of the critical ones we want to study for the even more detailed study options that would happen in basically in the fall until we get to the preferred schematic report, which means we now start to get to the point where we study those whatever short list of options. We arrive at sort of what we view as the preferred schematic. That is, the plan is for that is to have that be submitted to the MSBA on the beginning of December. I noticed that there is a problem on line 41 with a link that I have to look at that relates to the third community forum. The third community forum is supposed to be sometime in that time frame, not immediately after the other second community forum. So that is where the board does the MSBA board does take action on that, and they allow us to take that preferred schematic into schematic design, which we've talked in the past here represents somewhere around 20% of the design process, 20 to 25% of the design process. Our plan is to do schematic design on the preferred option, and if you go to line 49, we would submit the first phase of the schematic design, which would be the actual design to the MSBA by the end of April. We need to estimate that and put a budget together and submit a second part of that a few weeks later, which we're planning on doing on May 10th. And then that board meeting is scheduled for, on line 59, on the end of May 25th. And what we talked about at the working group was to, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mike or Dr. Izzy, but we would hold on the strength of this project scope and budget agreement, which is the deal. It is the cost, it's the schedule, it's the scope, it's everything that you vote on as a town. That would have a special town meeting as probably part of the annual town meeting process for some time in the May town meeting timeframe. The board would vote the end of May, and we would have the ballot debt exclusion sometime in early June. So it would be sandwiched with a town meeting, MSBA board vote, and a debt exclusion ballot initiative at the beginning of June. And that's really, I think, the most important part of the schedule at this point. I mean, the rest is trying to fill out when we would get to construction, but at this point, I think that's quite speculative until we know what we're going to be working on. Does anyone have any questions on the schedule?
No, but I'd emphasize the last part of that is what we discussed at the working group was that would be a single issue special election in June. So, and I only say that for people who are watching at home, that this won't be mixed in with our annual elections, which I think people would anticipate, or the federal election, which would be later in the month of December, because the timeline that we're on, we're sort of locked into acting fairly quickly after the MSBA acts, and June was really the first opportunity that we saw to do that, which I think would be news to some people, so.
Be a single question.
Right.
Yes or no?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to time it right. I mean, we've got obviously graduation the first part of June. We've got prom, things like that. So we're going to have to, once we get closer to it, we're going to have to be very careful on our scheduling.
Tim, on the facilities assessment committee,
Yep.
who actually makes the presentation? Is it the
Well,
architect
the
and the
presentation is
OPM?
made by DRA
Yeah,
predominantly.
DRA, and
We have a small, but they make the actual.
do they require anybody from the town to
Yeah.
be
Yeah,
there?
the
They would
superintendent also participates to present the education
Right.
plan, Joel.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
But
right.
others, but also, probably the chairman of the committee should be there, and they'll ask us for a roster of people.
One of us should be
There's
there.
3 or 4 people that should be from Stoughton at that.
And for the board meeting, same thing? Although I think at the board meeting, they don't really entertain any
The
presentation.
board meeting is good to go because,
You're just going to see what happens.
it shows enthusiasm for the MSB, but the board is a pretty at that point is a pretty pro forma vote. They don't generally, the staff does all the presentation and the board votes. And there may be some discussion, but it's
Okay.
a pretty pro forma
Chance to
vote.
stand up and say thank you.
And they do like to recognize the districts that are,
Mhm.
and I think it's a good idea. We certainly would go as a
I think
representative.
the last ones I remember, the legislators came too.
Yeah, they like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay, the next item on our agenda, excuse me, is education plan schedule update. We talked briefly about this. We mentioned that DRA will be meeting with Principal Miller on Friday with her department heads, going through the entire day as a download, and I wanted to offer Carl and Scott a chance to discuss it. In your package is the schedule for the day, and it kind of gives you an overview of what they're going after for input from the school. So.
It's going to be fun.
Well, at this point, we could probably only comment on what the process is because we haven't really engaged in the process at all. But our goal is to interface as much as we can over the next 6 weeks before school ends and before we lose a lot of the faculty and staff. And we're starting out this Friday with a very rigorous day-long series of meetings where we're going to try to touch base with most of the major departments within the building. Again, these are kind of quick half-hour, 40-minute meetings that are going to focus on the educational principles that each of those program areas might be based on. It's going to get into talking about what in their existing areas works and doesn't work, what their visions are for the new areas that we're going to be working on the design for. It's kind of broad topics, hopefully a lot of energetic discourse about what this project is going to mean for the school and for their departments. And then from that series of meetings, we're going to recap at the end of the day with Principal Miller and hopefully with the superintendent. And we're going to recap on what we heard and what the next steps are going to be. Right now, we've identified 2 dates in June, I think the 22nd and the 23rd, is that right? Mm-hmm. That we're going to have another series of workshops, but with probably a more focused group. We're not going to be going back and talking with all of the departments, but we're going to be talking a little bit more globally about the program, about what we heard and what sort of wish list and what's reality, and make sure that everybody's ideas and visions are sort of focused and calibrated so we're kind of moving forward in one direction. Hopefully after those series of meetings, we'll have enough information that we can work with the principal, the superintendent, DRA, and our program consultant in helping the district to put together their educational program over the month of July. And that'll be our focus.
Thank you.
Now, just one other quick point, just so everyone understands. The educational program is going to identify the population and some of the specifics about what the architecture is going to be. But it also talks about ideas, and it talks about an architectural program is supposedly a narrative that is going to guide the design process. Once we have that program put together, that will be our Bible in terms of how we start developing those conceptual partie diagrams and developing the design. We're always checking back to the educational program to make sure, are we doing this? Are we accomplishing that? And making sure with meetings with you that you feel that we're accomplishing that also. It's the real governing tool that directs the design efforts once we start to present things graphically.
We have a little scheduling conflict I want to just discuss for everybody. The working group is also meeting on Friday at 9 o'clock, so who's going to be where?
Well, I'm going to be with the working group.
We'll be at the working group.
Okay.
Just Julie will be with her team.
Julie's leaving, and
Yeah.
Scott is going to be working with the educational group. And then
Dr.
I'm gonna-
Rizzi, you'll be with the,
Working group, I mean.
okay,
You're going to be there on
I'll be
Friday.
the working
outstanding,
group.
okay.
For a while.
And I'm going to split up, so I'll come to the working group, Joel.
All right,
Just so people know, this schedule was sent to me, and we tweaked who's meeting at what times. I can send you a new one,
Okay.
just because we didn't want to pull people out of classes, so.
That's fine,
We
yep.
just moved people
Could you send that to
around.
me tomorrow so
I
I
will.
can send it around to our team? Thanks.
And do we have 2 meeting places, since we're going to be overlapping, the working
We're
group?
gonna
Oh,
be- the
no, we're
working
gonna be
group
in
is
the-
the working
gotta
group
be
is going to
here, I
be here
Oh,
at the
okay,
town hall.
okay.
And
yeah. I
didn't
thought
mention that.
I
Mine's
thought I
in
mentioned
the
that to you.
Glad you told.
it was sent on your invite.
And our meeting's at the conference room in the main office.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Updated Outlook.
She's still going to be late.
Where are my conference rooms? My, yeah.
We'll send the working group committee a reminder tomorrow of the location. How's that?
Okay,
Bills?
I didn't.
And next, if there's anything else, next will be the approval of the invoice package. The invoice package only has Compass for this particular vendor invoice package for the amount of $6,536. Included, I do have a signature page. Thank you, Mike. I remembered. And we do have the updated budget summary that includes now the contract amount of DRA.
Is there a motion to pay invoice number CPM 4403 for $6,536?
I move that we recommend payment.
Recommend payment. All those in favor? There's no
Aye.
further discussion. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Next is the approval of the minutes, which are part of your attached package. Are there any changes? Spelling errors? Yeah, you worry when I do them.
Is
Yeah, I
this
didn't
how
see it.
Tiberi is spelled? I'm not quite sure.
Motion to approve the minutes of April 9th.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Okay, last, future agenda items. Committee has any suggestions for agenda items for next meeting?
When is our next meeting?
For second Thursday in June,
Side options criteria.
which is,
Yeah,
I want to say the 11th, but
Thank you all for making this special meeting that we had to readjust because of a death of the mother of a colleague on the Board of Selectmen that a number of us wanted to go to.
June 11th.
so.
The next meeting is June 11th.
that's what I thought, yeah.
We'll have the options criteria discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when you sent out the topics to be discussed, if you could note which items require a vote, if any.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any, since that's following the workshop too, is there any sort of report that we'll compile from
Mm-hmm.
be
Definitely.
available by that time, or is that too soon?
We should have some kind of recap by that time,
Okay.
today, no problem.
Good.
Yeah.
Forum recap.
And meetings typically at 5 or 5:30?
5:30.
5:30, okay.
Yeah, we've changed.
Officially making that,
I think
okay.
it's-
Did we change it to 5:30?
Yes.
I have 5 in my,
5:30.
for June 11th.
Okay.
I think it all got changed to 5:30, I think is what you did, Lauren.
Yeah, well, I think we found that there were more people that if we knocked it back 5:30, yeah. Yeah. Um,
So it's 5:30 then.
Yep.
Anything further?
I have a quick question. Can we just go around and quickly introduce ourselves?
Oh.
Because I
Oh,
haven't
that's
met-
right.
Sorry, I haven't met everyone yet,
I'm
and I'd like to
sorry.
get to know your names quickly.
I'm TJ Recupero. I'm on the Board of Selectmen in town.
Thanks, Steve.
Maureen Doherty, I'm the procurement office.
Yeah, we don't,
Lauren Yanowski, I'm
Lily Miller, principal.
Joel Harding?
Yes.
the partner town manager.
Mike Conley, community member.
Mike?
and you know me.
Sir. Rick, thank you. Right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm Scott Wooden from
I
the
apologize.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
There's nothing further. Is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor of
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.